Miss Marple Investigates The Lavender Croft Mystery. Chapter 1. A Curious Invitation. Miss Jane Marple was savoring the peace of her cozy cottage on the outskirts of St. Mary Mead, a village where secrets were scarce and gossip was plentiful. The morning sunlight danced through delicate lace curtains, painting playful patterns on the wooden floor. In her favorite armchair, Miss Marple was skillfully knitting an intricate lace shawl, her thoughts drifting as she watched her garden burst to life with blooming roses and tulips. A sudden tap at the window pulled her from her reverie. With a soft sigh, she stood and opened the window, revealing young Freddie Hastings, the local postman's punctual nephew. His cheeks were rosy from the brisk spring breeze, and he held a pristine white envelope, addressed in elegant, flowing script. "Good morning, Miss Marple," Freddie said with a polite nod, extending the envelope. "A letter for you." "Thank you, Freddie. Always so dependable," she replied warmly, accepting the envelope. As her fingers traced the elegant handwriting, she noticed the absence of a stamp, a rarity in their small village. Her curiosity piqued. She carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "Dear Miss Marple, I hope this finds you well. I am in need of your company and unique talents. Please come to Lavender Croft at your earliest convenience. There is a delicate matter that I believe only you can help resolve. Yours sincerely, Harriet Fenchurch." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she reread the letter. Lady Harriet Fenchurch was well known in St. Mary Mead for her lavish garden parties and kind-heartedness. It was unlike her to be so cryptic. Turning to Freddie, she asked softly, "Would you mind keeping this to yourself for now, Freddie?" "Of course, Miss Marple." "Not a word," Freddie assured her before tipping his hat and heading off. As she watched him disappear down the lane, Miss Marple's thoughts began to race. Lady Harriet was always so composed, so what could possibly have her reaching out in such a mysterious manner? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Miss Marple decided to visit Lavender Croft that very afternoon. She packed a small bag, including her knitting, a notebook, and a sturdy umbrella just in case. The walk to Lavender Croft was lovely, the path bordered by hedgerows bursting with vibrant spring flowers. St. Mary Mead's quaint charm unfolded with each step, its whitewashed cottages and neat gardens standing as a testament to the village's serene nature. As she approached the estate, Miss Marple admired the manicured lawns and towering oak trees that shaded the entrance. The grand, ivy-covered manor gleamed in the sunlight, its windows sparkling. The door was opened by Mrs. Morgan, the loyal housekeeper whose hands were busy arranging fresh flowers in a vase. Though she greeted Miss Marple with a warm smile, there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. "Miss Marple, how lovely to see you." Mrs. Morgan welcomed her. "Lady Harriet has been eagerly awaiting your visit." "Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Miss Marple replied with a pleasant smile, stepping inside. The drawing room was cozy, filled with the faint scent of lavender polish and old books. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating silver-framed photographs on the mantelpiece. Miss Marple's sharp eyes took in the faces within the frames: Lady Harriet, regal and graceful in evening gowns; her son Edward, handsome with a serious expression; and Phoebe, Lady Harriet's spirited niece, laughing joyfully. Lady Harriet entered the room with her usual poise, though worry was etched on her face. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her blue dress complemented her fair complexion. "Jane, thank you for coming on such short notice," Lady Harriet greeted, her voice wavering just slightly. "Please, sit down. There's something I must discuss with you." Miss Marple settled into a plush chair, her keen gaze never leaving Lady Harriet's face. "Is everything all right, Harriet?" she asked gently. Lady Harriet hesitated, her eyes drifting toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I fear something strange is happening at Lavender Croft," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Doors left unlocked, items moved, and unsettling notes left under my bedroom door. I don't know who's behind it or why." Miss Marple leaned forward, her curiosity growing. "That does sound troubling. Have you noticed any pattern to these events? Any changes in the household or among your guests?" Lady Harriet's eyes flicked to the photographs on the mantel before answering. Well, Edward has been under a lot of stress lately, and Phoebe seems more anxious than usual. We also have 2 guests staying with us, Colonel Archibald Redfern and my cousin Dorothy Smi. Dorothy's visit was rather unexpected, to be honest. Miss Marple's eyes sparkled with interest. It sounds like quite the household. Let's start by looking at one of those notes, shall we? Lady Harriet handed her a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, Miss Marple examined the message. You know what you've done. Confess before it's too late. The letters were cut from old magazines, a clear attempt to disguise the handwriting. Miss Marple's lips tightened. This is serious, Harriet, but don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of it. Sometimes, the most perplexing mysteries are hidden in plain sight, visible only to those who truly look. Lady Harriet let out a relieved breath. Thank you, Jane. I don't know who else to trust. Miss Marple gave her a reassuring smile. Let's start by taking a tour of the house. I'd like to get a sense of the place and meet everyone. Lady Harriet nodded, her shoulders relaxing. Yes, of course. Let's begin in the study. Edward spends most of his time there. Double quotes. As they left the drawing room, Miss Marple glanced once more at the door, her instincts whispering that the answers they sought were closer than they appeared. Her resolve strengthened, and she was ready to untangle the web of secrets surrounding Lavender Croft one delicate thread at a time. Colonel Redfern's unmistakable voice echoed through the hallway, laced with frustration and a touch of secrecy. Miss Marple paused, curiosity sparking within her as she recognized his commanding tone. I'm telling you, the Colonel said, his voice steady but tinged with irritation. If she finds out, his words were abruptly cut off by Dorothy Smi's urgent whisper. Shh, lower your voice. You'll alarm the servants. Pressed against the cool stone pillar, Miss Marple held her breath, perfectly hidden but close enough to catch snippets of their conversation. Her heart quickened at the mention of an original will. Legal documents, especially wills, often held the power to ignite disputes and reveal hidden motivations. Whatever the Colonel and Dorothy were scheming about, it clearly had significant consequences for the household. A sudden click of approaching heels shattered the stillness, and Miss Marple knew she had to move quickly. She composed herself, adopting an air of nonchalance as she glided down the corridor, seemingly just out for a casual evening stroll. From the opposite end of the gallery, Colonel Redfern and Dorothy appeared, both stiffening at the sight of her. The Colonel's posture was as rigid as ever, military discipline evident in every line, while Dorothy managed a tight, practiced smile. Good evening, Miss Marple, the Colonel greeted, his tone carefully controlled. Good evening, Colonel. Dorothy, she responded warmly, offering a polite nod. I trust you're enjoying your evening? Dorothy's eyes flickered with unease before she forced another smile. Quite lovely, thank you. The gardens are beautiful as always. Indeed, Colonel Redfern agreed, his gaze briefly shifting before returning to her with a guarded expression. Miss Marple continued down the corridor, her mind racing with possibilities. The reference to an original will, paired with their tense demeanor, hinted at a hidden truth, one powerful enough to upset the balance of the entire estate. She suspected that the will held provisions different from the current version, possibly favoring someone unexpected or altering the distribution of wealth. It was a secret that could change everything. Back in her room, Miss Marple replayed the conversation in her mind, piecing together the fragments. Both the Colonel and Dorothy seemed to be deeply invested in keeping Lady Harriet in the dark. But why? And what was at stake? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Phoebe, her young face shadowed with concern. Miss Marple, may I speak with you? Of course, dear. Come in. Phoebe hesitated, twisting her hands nervously. I couldn't help but overhear. Is everything all right with Colonel Redfern and Miss Smi? Miss Marple offered a reassuring smile. I believe they were simply discussing some matters of importance. Nothing for you to worry about, my dear. Phoebe's shoulders relaxed, though her eyes still held traces of worry. I just hope Lady Harriet isn't troubled further. She's been through so much already. Your concern does you credit, Phoebe, Miss Marple said kindly. Rest assured, I'll see to it that everything is resolved peacefully." After Phoebe left, Miss Marple felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. The original will, the Colonel's urgency, Dorothy's anxiety, all were threads in a web of intrigue she was determined to untangle. She resolved to keep her observations sharp and her questions subtle. Later that evening, she took a quiet walk through the garden, her thoughts racing as the stars twinkled overhead, silent witnesses to the secrets within Lavender Croft. Whatever truths were hidden within those walls, Miss Marple would uncover them patiently and methodically, just as she always did. In her cozy guest room, Miss Marple was absorbed in a worn copy of Shakespeare, letting the familiar words provide a comforting background to her thoughts. The steady ticking of the mantel clock was a soothing rhythm, keeping time with her musings. But the tranquility was abruptly shattered by raised voices echoing down the hall, followed by the unmistakable crash of something heavy hitting the floor. Miss Marple's calm demeanor flickered with concern. She set the book aside, its characters momentarily forgotten, and rose gracefully, her movements deliberate yet swift. Her sensible slippers made only the faintest whisper against the polished wooden floor as she moved down the hallway toward the library, the source of the commotion. As she approached the door, the agitated murmur of voices grew louder. Bracing herself, she gently pushed the door open, revealing a scene of disarray. Lady Harriet stood by the entrance, her usually pristine appearance now disheveled, her face pale with shock. Beside her, young Phoebe clutched her shawl tightly, her shoulders trembling. Inside the room, the sight was even more alarming. Colonel Archibald Redfern lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious, his once impeccable jacket now rumpled. A small table by the fireplace was overturned, its contents scattered haphazardly across the floor. Miss Marple's sharp eyes quickly noted his jacket pocket turned inside out, as though someone had desperately rifled through it. "Lady Harriet, Phoebe," Miss Marple called softly, her voice calm and steady as she approached. "What happened here?" Before either could respond, Dorothy Smi appeared at the doorway, her usual poise shaken. "I heard a terrible noise. Is everyone all right?" she asked, eyes wide with alarm. Moments later, Edward burst into the room, his face flushed. "I was upstairs when I heard the crash. What on earth is going on?" he demanded, struggling to catch his breath. Mrs. Morgan, the loyal housekeeper, hovered near the doorway, her hands trembling as she held a tray. Is everyone safe?" she whispered, her worried gaze darting from one face to another. Miss Marple knelt beside Colonel Redfern, her experienced fingers gently examining his head. "He's breathing, but he's suffered a nasty blow. We need to get help right away." Lady Harriet's voice wavered as she pleaded. "Jane, please call the village doctor. He needs attention immediately." Miss Marple moved swiftly, the gears of her mind already turning as she reached for the telephone. In no time, Dr. Leonard Fields arrived, his reassuring presence bringing a semblance of order to the chaotic scene. After a brief examination, he instructed them to let the colonel rest and avoid moving him too much. Once the doctor departed, Miss Marple's keen eyes swept over the room, noting every detail. The library, usually a place of quiet study, was now a scene of upheaval, books strewn across the floor. The cabinet door near the fireplace left ajar. It was clear someone had been searching for something, and with great urgency. Near Colonel Redfern's hand, she noticed a piece of paper. Picking it up, she saw it was blank, except for a faint watermark. Wintersby and Company, solicitors. Her mind raced, already piecing together the implications. Turning to the colonel, she spoke gently. "Colonel Redfern, do you remember what you were looking for before you were attacked?" He stirred, his voice faint as he tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. I was looking for some papers. Important ones," he murmured. "There's been trouble with the estate. Disagreements about Sir Reginald's will." Miss Marple's mind clicked into place. The mention of the will, the chaotic search, the blank solicitor's paper. It was becoming evident that the estate's inheritance was at the heart of this mystery. Her gaze turned toward the others gathered in the room. It seemed someone was desperate to find those documents, perhaps even willing to use violence to get them. Dorothy's eyes widened. "I swear, I had nothing to do with this. I only came in to return a book. I would never harm the Colonel. Miss Marple's expression softened. I believe you, Dorothy, but it is my duty to consider all possibilities. Colonel, could you explain more about the issues with the estate? He hesitated, his gaze distant. Lady Harriet called me to review some discrepancies in Sir Reginald's will. It seems not everything is as straightforward as it should be. Lady Harriet's face grew pale as she gripped the back of a chair for support. Do you think this attack has something to do with the inheritance? She asked, her voice trembling. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. I do. Wills often bring out the worst in people, I'm afraid. Secrets, hidden agendas, sometimes even violence. Her gaze grew steely as she continued. Whoever did this won't stop here. We must be on guard and protect any remaining documents. I will continue my observations, but I need everyone's full cooperation. The room fell silent, tension hanging heavy in the air. Each face held a different expression: fear, confusion, suspicion. It was clear that trust was in short supply. As the evening wore on, Miss Marple retired to her room, her mind buzzing with questions. She carefully tucked the blank solicitor's paper into her notebook, its significance not yet fully known, but undoubtedly crucial. Gazing out of her window at the moonlit gardens, she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. The pieces were starting to come together, but the game was far from over. Secrets never stayed buried for long, especially under her watchful eye. With renewed determination, she whispered to herself, every puzzle has a solution. It's just a matter of seeing the pieces clearly. And with that, she settled in for the night, ready to unravel the tangled web of intrigue that surrounded Lavender Croft. Miss Marple sat quietly in her guest room, absorbed in a well-worn volume of Shakespeare. The familiar words wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, easing her into deep thought. The soft ticking of the mantel clock added a soothing rhythm to the peaceful setting. But then, the stillness was abruptly shattered. Sharp voices echoed through the hallway, followed by a loud crash from the library. Muffled shouts broke the calm, and a flicker of concern crossed Miss Marple's composed face. Setting her book aside, its characters momentarily forgotten, she rose gracefully. Her movements were measured and calm, reflecting the steady resolve that had helped her solve so many mysteries. She made her way down the hallway, her sensible slippers whispering across the polished wooden floorboards. As she neared the library door, the voices grew louder, urgent, and panicked. Pushing open the door, Miss Marple was met with a scene of chaos. Lady Harriet stood by the entrance, her usual poise undone, hair slightly out of place, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. Next to her, young Phoebe clung to her shawl, trembling and clearly shaken. Inside the library, the scene was even more startling. Colonel Archibald Redfern lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious. His uniform was rumpled, and the small study table by the fireplace was overturned. Papers scattered everywhere. Miss Marple's sharp eyes immediately noticed that the Colonel's jacket pocket was turned inside out, as if someone had rummaged through it in a hurry. She approached Lady Harriet and Phoebe with gentle concern, her voice steady and reassuring. Lady Harriet, Phoebe, what happened here? Before they could answer, Dorothy Smi appeared at the doorway, her face a mix of worry and confusion. I heard a terrible noise and came to see what was wrong, she explained, her usual calm demeanor shaken. Edward rushed into the room moments later, breathless and flushed. I was upstairs when I heard the commotion. I came as quickly as I could, he said, his voice strained. Mrs. Morgan, the loyal housekeeper, stood at the entrance clutching a tea tray, her hands trembling. Is everyone all right? She asked softly, her eyes darting nervously between the distressed faces. Miss Marple knelt beside the Colonel, her experienced fingers gently examining his temples. He's alive but badly hurt, she announced calmly. It appears he was struck on the head. We need to get help right away. Lady Harriet's composure wavered, her voice tinged with panic. Jane, please call the village doctor. Miss Marple moved to the telephone, her mind already piecing together the puzzle before her. Dr. Leonard Fields arrived swiftly. After examining the Colonel, he advised rest and minimal movement. Once the doctor left, Miss Marple's keen eyes surveyed the room. Books lay scattered across the floor, and a cabinet near the fireplace was slightly ajar, its contents disturbed. Someone had clearly been searching for something, and with urgency. Her gaze fell on a single sheet of paper lying near the Colonel's outstretched hand. Picking it up, she saw it was mostly blank except for a faint watermark reading, Wintersby and Company Solicitors. A spark of curiosity lit her eyes. The name stirred a feeling of significance. Turning to the Colonel, Miss Marple asked gently, "Do you remember what you were looking for before you were attacked?" The Colonel groaned, his face contorted with pain. I was searching for some documents. Important ones," he managed, his voice weak. Miss Marple's mind was already connecting the dots. It seems someone else was after those documents too. "Do you recall anything unusual recently?" The Colonel shook his head slowly. "No, but there's been tension about the estate since Sir Reginald passed away." Her thoughts raced, piecing together the scene: the overturned table, the rummaged pocket, the mention of solicitors. It all hinted at a deeper intrigue surrounding the estate and its inheritance. She turned to the rest of the room, her voice calm but firm. "This was no accident. Someone here has a strong interest in those documents, perhaps more than one person." Dorothy's face tightened. "I had nothing to do with this. I only came to the library to return a book." Miss Marple's gaze was kind but unwavering. "I believe you, Dorothy, but I must consider all possibilities." Colonel Redfern sighed, leaning back. With a wince, "I was invited by Lady Harriet to discuss the estate. There are issues with the will, discrepancies that need resolving." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed with understanding. Discrepancies in a will can cause quite a stir. It's no surprise that tensions are high, but it's clear someone is willing to go to great lengths regarding this matter. Lady Harriet, her face pale, placed a trembling hand on Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, what should we do?" Miss Marple's eyes swept over the room, her voice steady. "We must first ensure everyone's safety. Then, we secure any important documents. I'll continue to observe and gather information. For now, we must all remain calm and cooperative. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves when least expected. As evening settled over Lavender Croft, an uneasy tension hung in the air. Miss Marple, however, felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fall into place, each clue drawing her closer to the truth. Retreating to her room, she carefully tucked the solicitor's paper into her notebook. Its importance wasn't yet clear, but she knew it held a vital key to unraveling this mystery. As moonlight streamed through her window, Miss Marple's resolve deepened. Hidden within the genteel walls of Lavender Croft lay secrets that needed to be uncovered, and she was determined to expose them one delicate thread at a time.